commandment tonight, and so before we jump in, just as always, we want to point out a few things that we want to keep in our minds when we're studying the commandments. One is they tend to be the low bar. They tend to be not the high bar. You know, saying do not murder is not necessarily the high bar of the moral law when it comes to how we treat other people, right? Most of us could probably say, yeah, I haven't done that. Good. I'm good with God because I didn't kill anybody today. But then Jesus goes and says, let me raise the bar for you and say that if you have had hatred in your heart towards someone, you've already committed murder. Now I'm on that list all of a sudden. And then you start to look at all the permutations. Another thing we know is this, that while the law doesn't set for us the high bar of looking at the heart, it is, or while it doesn't explicitly do that, I should say, it does implicitly do that. And so it shows us this sort of mirror of who we are, of what we really are in the depths of our soul when we ponder. What is it that's forbidden in these laws, and what is it that's required in these laws? And so not only is it not enough that I not murder someone, but I also need to ask, am I harboring hatred towards someone? But I also then have to ask with something like murder, am I cherishing life? Am I pursuing ways to help this person flourish? And not just in the common sense, but am I pursuing ways to see them flourish eternally through the sharing of the gospel of Jesus Christ with them? That would be an example of some of the ways we want to flesh these out. So murder being an example, or that commandment, you shall not murder, being an example of how we would flesh out a full picture of that. The other thing we always want to remember is this. All these different permutations, these spectrums we might come up with as we ponder, what does it really mean to not murder? What does it really mean to cherish life? We can get lost in the quagmire of all that and all of a sudden go, whoa, that's a lot more than I thought it was. I'm a complete and utter failure. I gotta either get to work, or I just gotta quit and give up. Or just don't care and just keep doing whatever I was doing. But none of those three are really gospel options, are they? The law shows us the condition of our hearts, and it should always point us all the more to the grace of Christ Jesus. So that we go there and we say, here's the one who has kept this perfectly. Here's the one who is without sin, and yet he cherished my life so much that by grace he went to the cross in my place. Not just so he could free me from the penalty of sin, but so that he could free me from the power of it. And by giving me his Spirit could set me on that path of freedom to now carry out this law in all its spectrum and permutations in a manner that would exemplify my growing sanctification. So there's a full picture when you really look at the entirety of the gospel that comes with the law, so that we're able to delight in it, as the psalmist says. So that we're able to not see it as simply a burden that we can't meet, but rather as something we've been released to pursue. And that all in through and by the work of Christ and the presence of his Spirit in us. So, that's, by way of introduction, puts us now at the 8th commandment. And the 8th commandment is, you shall not steal. Alright? So, how do we want to look at that? Well, let's consider a couple of relationships that we might look at. With relationship to the Lord, what might it mean for us to say, you shall not steal? The scripture is pretty clear. God's the creator of all things, right? Genesis 1 and 2, I can go read that if you'd like me to. Everybody got at least a general grasp of what's going on there in Genesis 1 and 2? Adam make anything? No, God made it all. And as such, God then said what about Adam and Eve? After he had made it all and said it's all good, even at the end, very good, he then said, Be fruitful and multiply. Rule and have dominion over the birds of the air and the fish of the sea and the things that creep and crawl and move along the ground. And all this he did, and those are commandments from God, which tells us that it's God's creation. And that he's put Adam in charge of it, but Adam has a charge from God to rule it and have dominion over it, but all that still to the glory of God. In God giving Adam that charge, that mandate, he wasn't saying, here, I give this to you and wash my hands of it. The creation is no longer mine. Rather, he was putting Adam in charge in a pretty specific relationship. Very churchy word. Anybody know the word we might use to speak of Adam in this scenario? Starts with an S, ends with a tour. Anybody? Starts with S, ends with tour. See how I did that? Steward. Yes. Good job, Miss Faith. Adam is set up as this steward king. And so he rules, but he rules under the rule and dominion of God. He rules, but he rules by the rule of God. And so this concept of stewardship is introduced not by word, but it's introduced by concept right off the bat in Genesis 1 and 2. Adam doesn't own anything, even though he does, in a certain sense, possess everything. And when we want to start talking about what does it mean to not steal, we have to understand, all right, what's the relationship between us and stuff anyway? And the place to start always is, well, first and foremost, what's the relationship between God and all stuff? All that is, both material and abstract for that matter. All right, so let's start looking through. Anybody got their Bibles on their phones? Want to play sword drills with me? Try to beat me to Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Or anybody know it off the top of your head? The earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. That's verse 1. Good job. That's okay. That's better than, better than Mackie did. So. All right, so here we go. Verse 24, 1 and 2. The earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers. So the psalmist is reminding them of the reality of what happened in Genesis 1 and 2, right? Hey, God did all this. He's the one who has ownership and lordship over all of this stuff. Now, Psalm 115, what do we got there? 14 through 16 says this: May the Lord give you increase, you and your children. May you be blessed by the Lord, who made heaven and earth. The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of man. So there we see both and again, right? God's the one who's made it, and if you are going to be fruitful, if you are going to have more children yourself, well, guess who's going to have to give that to you? God is. And he's the one who made all the earth. And he's the one who put us as rulers and those with dominion and those with steward-like possession of it. So all these psalms are pointing that out. Job 1:21. I know you know that one. Oh, I went to Job. Excuse me. I went to 21 instead of 1 first. It says, and this is Job saying, after he's lost everything, he says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now, let's stop there for a second before we continue with the list. Job was what kind of man before he lost everything? What kind of everything did he have? A lot of everything, right? His everything was a lot of stuff. He was a righteous man, but he was also a very prosperous man. Now, oftentimes in the Bible makes sure this is pointed out in numerous occasions. Luke 18, one of those chief places, but not the sole place. Oftentimes, prosperous people, wealthy people, can have an over-dependence on their wealth rather than on God, right? And so it's not unusual, or wouldn't be considered unusual, if Job instead, after losing everything, had said something more like, what am I going to do? Everything that matters in life is gone. What's the point of even living? Right? I mean, he would be the first person to think things like that. Or, oh my goodness, I lost everything. I've got to do whatever it takes to get as much back as I can. But that's not what Job says. Instead, Job says what? He says, he's ultimately saying, you know what? God's in charge here. I'm just a steward. This is all God's stuff. Elsewhere, it says in the scriptures that the cattle on 1,000 hills belongs to who? It belongs to God. I was talking to someone here at one time who's been very blessed by God in the material ways, and blessed by God spiritually as well, but materially very blessed by God. We were talking about church budget. And I can't remember, paying off buildings or something. You know, it feels like sometimes we're always talking about money around here. That's probably a lot of what you talk about in your homes or think about at times. And this person said to me, well, you know what? We just pray because it's all God's money anyway. And I couldn't help but immediately think of Job, thinking, man, it'd be real easy for that person instead to be the kind who would say, well, if you butter up to me, I might help you. Or, well, you know, don't keep coming to me. Not that I was going to this person asking for money, but it'd be real easy to have that sort of sense of identity with your possessions. But that's not where this person came from. This person was coming more from a place of, man, this is all God's. We're all just stewards of it. Me, you, her, him. And so Job helps us to see that. Matthew 25:14-31. Anybody know what parable that is? Talking about all the stuff being God's stuff. Is that a hint? Sometimes you talk about time and talents and treasures. So that's the parable of the talents, you know, and the one guy got 5, and the other guy got 2, and the other guy got 1, right? The guy with 5 doubled it, and the master, when he had come back, said, well done, good and faithful servant. You know, I'm going to give you even more stuff. And then the guy with 2, he doubled it, well done, same thing. Well done. The guy with 1 buried it, right? He didn't lose it, did he? What does that tell us about our relationship with our master when it comes to using the things that he has entrusted to us as stewards? If he's given us 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year, 80 years, give or take, he's given us that time. He's given us talents, maybe to sing, or maybe to teach, or hospitality, or whatever talents he's given us. If he's given us treasures, what does it say about his expectation of how we're going to use it? And to whose glory we're going to use it for? For him, right? It's all his, and it all has a grand purpose, and the grand purpose of it all is not for me. Not primarily for me, for sure, but to honor and glorify him. And that parable of the talents makes that abundantly clear. And all that you think, and all that you speak, and all that you do, indeed, and all that you are, is it all to the glory of God, or are you burying the talents, the time, the treasures that could be for the use of God's kingdom? All right, 1 Peter 4, 10 and 11. Take a look at that real fast here. Your pastor be awesome if he had all these memorized. All right, verse 10 says, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks is one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves is one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. So, I kind of touched on it in talking about the talents, but the temptation oftentimes with the things God gives us is not to see them as things we are stewarding, but to see them as what? things that are ours. And if I think it's mine, then how might I treat it? I might treat it as if its purpose is for my joy, my glory, my significance, my security. If I've been getting a lot of money, I might want to stick it in all kinds of investments or savings so that I feel really secure in my life, right? Because if I have plenty of money, then nothing can touch me. I'll be bulletproof in life, right? Isn't that how that works? I'll sink it all in real estate pre-2007, and then life will be great, right? That'll work out perfectly. No, not at all. But if whatever I've been given, the time, the talents, the treasures, if I see them as a stewardship and say, man, this is for my master's glory, then that's not a burden, that's very free. Because my security, my significance is not in, am I getting enough glory out of this? Am I using this to maximize me? But rather, I'm able to say, the King of Kings has loved me in eternal ways. It's evident in His Son on the cross. He loves me so much. How could I do anything but use this to try and glorify Him? Malachi 3, 9 and 12, that's the passage that says, hey, don't withhold the tithe from me. There's certainly a worship aspect to our giving, right? All that we have is God's, but there is a very particular aspect in Scripture that talks about giving to what we now call the church, and in ancient Israel's day to the temple and to the priests and the Levites who ran the temple complex and the religious system of sacrifices and so on and so forth. That's all part of God's the community, if you would, and the fellowship that He's built. Giving to the church is not the totality of your giving to God. It's about 10%, hopefully, for most of us. But it's certainly a very strong indication of our understanding of where we stand in this relationship. And then Mark 12, 13 to 17. Blinking on that one. 2 seconds. Says this. This is give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Remember that passage? They come to Jesus and, hey, we're going to catch him this time. What should we do? We're supposed to pay taxes or what? God has made abundantly clear that He's in charge of what? Everything. Who's in charge of Caesar? According to Scripture. God. Who put Nebuchadnezzar in place in Babylon? God. Who put him out in the field eating grass? God. God's the one who puts these authorities in place, and yes, there are times where we're called to obedience to those authorities, and we use our talents and our time and our treasures in some of these hierarchies, social and political and economic and so on and so forth, and family. Because we're not, no matter what the 21st century Western way of looking at the world says, we're not just completely independent creatures who get to walk around in this amoeba-like bubble as if we exist as a person unto ourselves. If we just stick our earphones in, then we don't have to interact with anybody else, really. We have this autonomy, but we really don't have that level of autonomy, do we? We are put, by God's design, into these places where God says, hey, you're part of this family, you're part of this community, you're part of this organization. And yes, those have structures, and all those are put there by God. That doesn't mean they're perfect, but they're all there by the grace of God. So understanding that our use of our resources comes in relationship with those other things is all part of understanding our relationship with the Lord. So that brings us to this then. What is our relationship to others? And we may not think of it with these boxes like this, but how many of us, when it comes to property and time and treasures, are oftentimes really thinking through these sort of categories? That's mine. Okay, that's yours. All right, this is ours. And where do we usually start to see the rub between husbands and wives, parents and children, siblings, lots of sibling issues here. We start to see the issues with what? Confusion about what's mine, what's yours, and what's ours. And so let's take a look. Does the Bible affirm personal private property? Well, by implication, to say you shall not steal, the Bible is saying what? Yeah, there's a certain stewardship you personally have over some things. And part of that stewardship is for those things, sometimes, to serve ultimately God to His glory, but in the here and now, they might be mostly intended to serve you, right? Your house. Who's that chiefly for? For you and your family, right? Now, through hospitality, should you also open that house to have others in? Provide a bed for those in need? Provide a meal for those in need? Absolutely. But chiefly, that house is yours to steward, and it's chiefly for you to steward for whose use? For yours. It's your house, right? It's God's house, but it's yours to steward. So it affirms implicitly that there is such a thing as private property. Just as an example, the land allotment in the book of Joshua shows us this. Now, in the Old Testament, Israel had an even, the land was allotted, and just to remind us that the relationship between God and the land, and therefore Israel and the land, was all connected. There was no such thing really, at least not in the law, as selling property. Is that a shock to anybody? How many of you remember when I was preaching through Joshua? I think that was the second sermon series I ever did, so that would have been 8 years ago now. Is that right? 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago. So here's how they did property. By God's decree. Hey, we're going to give this portion of land to the tribe of Judah. And hey, we're going to give this portion of land within Judah to these different clan heads. And hey, we're going to give this portion of this property that is under this clan head to these different sons of that clan head. And it stays in that clan, and it stays in that tribe as long as Israel, the Old Testament theocracy, Israel exists. And so what happens if Chad and his clan come under some hardship? Well, I could sell my property. And let's say that I sell it to Tom Galloway, and he comes in, but he doesn't really own my property. He owns the rights to the fruit of that land for a season, until I can either pay him back, or until the year of Jubilee comes around. And when the year of Jubilee comes around, guess what? Tom's supposed to give that property back to me in full. He's basically getting a lease-free use of the land for however long the time frame there, and that's what he gets. But he doesn't get to keep it. But the implication is that God has set up this tribe's steward of this land, this tribe's steward of this land, and so on and so forth. All right, now I'm stealing the term generous justice here from Tim Keller. Has anybody read that book by Tim Keller? No? Well, if you haven't, it's great. It's worth reading. But these passages don't necessarily come from that book, just the title of this heading here. All right, so we know that private property is something that the Scriptures affirm to a certain degree. Maybe not quite to the degree that we now understand private property, but it certainly affirms that. But what does it talk about the use then of that property? It may be chiefly for me, but is it only for me? Is my house only for me? Are my funds only for me? Is my time only for me? No, God has told us we're to love Him with all our heart, soul, and mind, so we've talked about that already. And then I'm to love you, how? As myself. And I'm to love not just you, but all my neighbors as myself. And then Jesus went and told me who my neighbor is, which is people lying down on hard times in a ditch that I don't want to stop and help. So that's where we kind of are with this. Acts 2, 42 and 47, and then 4, 32 to 37 give us this picture of what was going on in the early church. It says things like this. And none of them are, well, let me put it like this. It says things like, and they all held their property in common. Now, it doesn't mean that there was this communistic society taking root there in Jerusalem and that they pooled all their resources and divided it up equally. What it means is this. If Chad Reynolds fell on hard times, Tom Galloway came in and said, hey, I can help you through right now. Maybe Tom would sell a piece of property, or maybe he would liquidate some other asset to come and help me get back on my feet. Not to enable me to just stay off my feet, but to help me get back up and going. That's what it means when it says, and they held all their goods in common. That Tom didn't see that as Tom's only, but he saw it as Christ's, and therefore if Christ is united with Tom and Christ is united with Chad, then in some sense it belongs to me too. Is anybody getting a little itchy right now? Feeling kind of allergic to some of this? In 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, what's going on? Anybody remember there? You probably remember the cheerful giver verse, right? But the bigger thing that's going on is the people in Jerusalem, the church in Jerusalem is struggling. There's famine there. They don't have enough to eat. Destitute. Paul's going around to all the Gentile churches. Now, how do the Jews generally view the Gentiles? Especially Jerusalem Jews. How do they oftentimes view the Gentiles? Not so great, right? But Paul's going around to all the Gentile Christians saying what? Let's put aside some money every week, every month. Store it up, send it back, and help the brothers and sisters back in Jerusalem. Now, Paul doesn't say, you got to, here's the amount, boom. He says, do it with a what? A cheerful heart. He's calling for generosity, but he's calling for it based on this idea of really a justice concept. Proverbs 3, 27 and 28. This is my favorite passage to read to capitalistic Americans. All right, let's see. So, Proverbs 3, 27 says this, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come again, tomorrow I will give it, when you have it with you. Now that second verse gets quoted in another passage in the New Testament, in James, I think it's chapter 5. Don't withhold good from someone when you have it in your power to give it. But the previous verse said what? Don't withhold good from those to whom it is due. Which seems to imply that the person in legitimate need before you has what? A right to your stuff. Some grimaces. There's also blank stares. That's something for us certainly to ponder, right? And to really think through. Now that's a pithy saying, but it bears, really teasing out through the totality of Scripture. But if you go and look, you'll start to see that the orphan and the widow and the poor and the sojourner are oftentimes spoken of as having what? A right to your aid. And yes, in conjunction with that is this need for that aid to come cheerfully, to come as one who has him or herself received aid eternally from Jesus. And so it's a generous justice that we provide out of the treasures and out of the time and out of the talents that the Lord has given to us. There are also passages we need to balance this with that say things like, hey, the sluggard doesn't eat. If you're capable of working, get a job. That's in Ephesians 4. And the sluggard stuff is in Proverbs. So there is this right understanding for us to say, wait a second, it's not just not just a quote-unquote handout that God's calling me to do here. Which brings us to this concept of gleaning. What was the Levitical concept of gleaning? Say that again, Shelley? Yeah, you weren't supposed to harvest to the margins. And not only to the margins, but if you're walking along and you're harvesting and stuff falls out of your basket or whatever you're putting stuff in, you're supposed to do what? You leave it. You don't just sweep clean the row as you're going up and down through the field. You leave it because coming up behind you is Ruth the beautiful Moabitess, right? And your boss told you to leave some for her. But even more than Ruth the Moabitess, your bigger boss, not just Boaz, but God himself said, leave some for the poor and the orphan and the widow to come. And so there's this sort of, square deal work plan built into the fabric of Israel's life back then. And so whose was that in the field? Well, the main part of the harvest was Boaz. But what was dropped and what was at the margins was Ruth. And so in a certain sense you'd say it's yours, it's mine, it's ours. And then in Galatians 6:10, although I'm going to back up to verse 7 there just to get this concept of reaping and sowing. Because I think Paul's pointing us back to this sort of gleaning concept, this idea of the agricultural society. He says, do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Clearly he's not talking here about material sowing and reaping, but he's talking more about spiritual. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. So he doesn't say do exclusively good for those who are of the church, of the household of faith. But he does say there is sort of a, man, you definitely ought to be doing good to each other. And then you ought to be, as much as you possibly can, be doing good to everyone. And that good is not solely material good, but also moral and spiritual good as well. And so when we withhold that from others, then we're not living this generous life. We're not looking to see that they have that which is their due. Opportunity to work, opportunity to eat, opportunity to have the shelter they need. All right, so some of the negative sides, or some of the forbidden side of things here. Robbery, right? That's an easy one to look at. How about this one? We were talking about this at staff the other day. I was confessing part of this here. The misuse of, not so much funds, but in my case, the misuse of time. Anybody a waster of time? Yeah? If we were to count up how many hours we spend. Well, let me use an illustration. So there's a commercial. This tells you how much TV I watch right now. Okay? ESPN, largely. So there's a commercial that comes on. I think it's on Sports Network where I see this. And it's this couple, and the TV, you can hear the end of like a TV show, and they're sitting on the couch. And the guy starts talking, and he says, man, we just watched 10 seasons of this TV show in one sitting. That was awesome. And usually a TV show is like 20 episodes in a season, so 10 times 20 is like 200 episodes of TV. He's got a beard down to here. Then she starts checking her email and stuff. She's like, oh, we missed Granddad's 99th birthday. Oh, we missed his funeral too. And then the guy's like, whoa, I got a beard. And then he finds a potato chip in his beard and he eats it. And you're laughing, you're watching that, but then sometimes I'm sitting there going, it's not that far from the truth sometimes. How much time we spend just, man, the phone dings, I go to check an email, and the next thing you know, I'm looking at updates on ESPN.com, or I'm thinking, well, while I'm on here, I better check this other thing out too, and oh, now I'm reading this article about this, and oh, there, now I'm playing, some game that my kids put on here, and the next thing you know, 25 minutes have gone by, and I've accomplished zero that has eternal value. And And so I repent, or at least I confess. I'm working towards repentance by God's grace. But misuse of funds, time, talent, intellectual property, right? Stuff that's so commonly stolen now. Identity theft. Anybody get hacked ever in the last little bit? Yeah. Tax evasion. I mean, these are sort of easy peasy ones to pick out and say, man, that's that, and that's that, and that's that. But again, these are on sort of the forbidden side, and it's real easy for us to kind of focus on that. And they're at the personal level. But what about systemic things? What about at a bigger level where we feel like, man, I don't know where my voice is and where my place is in this. In the Bible, there's this term called man-stealing. And it oftentimes gets translated as kidnapping, or sometimes it'll get translated as like slavery. But it's a different type of thing than what the Bible other times talks about as slavery. Sometimes the Bible talks about slavery, which is something more akin to what we would call indentured servitude. Like, hey, I'm on hard times, so I go and sell myself to you for 7 years, and I work for you, and you pay my debt off, and then I get set free 7 years later. But there's rules to it. You're not supposed to mistreat me, and I'm not your property, and that kind of thing. But then there's man-stealing, and that's something altogether different. Now, obviously, in our own nation, that's something that we have, right? I mean, how did slaves even get here? People went and stole them, right, out of tribal lands in Africa and brought them here, and then sold them. So that's not something that is, in the big scheme of the history of the world, it's not something that's that ancient in our day and time. All right, what about civil rights or religious liberties? Is that not a certain sense of, or the denial of those things? If you're denied your civil rights, if you're denied your religious liberties, is that denial not effectively a form of stealing, a form of theft? You are losing freedom or losing opportunity to exercise the fullness of humanity. The picture here, so I put a little subcategory of racism versus racialization, which is really sort of two different things. Racism is this pretty blatant, oftentimes, dismissal of and intentional separation between races, or we might think of a similar ethnic type thing going on there. But racialization is a little different. I'll point out the difference here. So the picture on the left, has anybody seen the movie Hidden Figures? It's a really cool movie. If you haven't seen it, it's interesting. It's about these African American women who were part of the space program to put Neil Armstrong into orbit in the 60s. And how many of you before the movie came out knew that African American women were engineers and mathematicians and scientists to make sure this happened? So it's a little told story, but this particular character, there's three main characters in the movie, and they all have their sort of character arc and their victory, if you would. But her particular victory was she went to a courthouse, and she was wanting to get an engineer's position at NASA, but there were no schools where particularly an African American woman could get an engineering degree. And so the reason that was even required, actually, this particular degree was even required for the job she was trying to get, was in effect to keep African Americans from getting the engineering position. They said you have to have a degree and you have to have it from this particular school. And then that particular school opened a night course in a local high school near them, but it was a segregated high school. And so you either couldn't afford to go to the University of Virginia, or you couldn't go to the segregated high school because you're an African American. So guess what you don't have? You don't have the opportunity to get the degree, and therefore you don't have the opportunity to get the job. And so that's the character arc for this woman. And I won't spoil it for you, but that's what she's trying to do. Now, so that's racism. That's blatant, right? You put rules in place and say, we're going to keep you in your place. Racialization is more unintentional. In his book, Generous Justice, Tim Keller tells about a guy, a Christian, who owns part-time, that's what I'm looking for, a used car dealership. And, when you go to buy a car, what do? Typically. Do what? You like haggle, right? They say, here's the sticker price, $20,000. You say, no way, that car's not worth $20,000. I'll give you 15. Oh, come on, miss, I've got a family to feed. I can't give you this for 15. And so then you get it for whatever. You come to the deal and you walk away and you feel great. Like, man, I really got a deal on him. And he's thinking, that sucker, I would have given it to him or her for this. So this guy, it's a Christian, he did some studying. And he found out that at his dealership, the people who got the best deal on cars were who? If you had to guess. If you had to pick a demographic, who got the best deal on cars at his dealership? White, educated, successful men who already had more money than most of his other clients. Who got the worst deal? Poor black women. Because for the most part, they were the least equipped to haggle. His business model was set up to, to kind of racialize and keep poor people poor and to keep black, and in that case specifically black women and oftentimes black single women in a vulnerable position. Which is expressly not what the gospel says to do, right? So he actually went to just a no haggle policy. This is I need to make this much money to keep my business going per car, this percentage of profit, and that's what we're sticking on the price. Whatever that was, I don't know. But so he just went to that. If you're the white rich guy, you pay that, and if you're the black poor lady, you pay that. And that was what he thought was the fairest thing he could do. But it was an interesting thing to read about. And you start to ask yourself, like, where are those kind of pockets of injustice in our world where effectively people are being robbed, either of opportunity or of maybe funds or time or treasures or talents? Because we're not looking around at the vulnerable and saying, how can we help this person? But rather, we're just assuming, well, this is how it is, and this is how it's always been, and everybody has the same opportunities, and maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have the same opportunities. And Scripture's replete with passages that say they don't have the same opportunities. And you need to be on the lookout for where they don't. And I'll just finish it with kind of tie that point up with this. Isn't that what the gospel is? Doesn't God look down and say, Jesus, take on flesh? Or Son, take on flesh, become Jesus? Because they don't have the opportunity for salvation unless you go and perfect righteousness for them. Because in their sin, they're incapable of it. And so you must do for them what they cannot do for themselves. They are orphans, and I need to adopt them in and through your righteousness. They are broken and poor, and I need to fill them up with my love and my grace and my mercy and my spirit and my goodness. And so that's what happens there. We won't deal with the monopoly thing there down at the bottom. All right, last thing that I'll say is this, and then we've got to move some tables. The need to be generous, the need to not steal from other people, doesn't equal we should have a joyless life and never appreciate and celebrate the things that we've got. We should recognize, like we said at the very beginning, God is the giver of all these things. And He hasn't given them to us for us to go, oh, I feel bad that I've got all this stuff. I'm guilt-ridden, I need to get rid of it. Or I'm I kind of enjoyed eating out that meal, or I kind of enjoyed like upgrading my kitchen, or I kind of enjoyed having this car with leather seats. I'm a bad person. Has anybody ever felt that? Because your pastor preached a sermon about being generous, and then you were like, oh, I just got the deluxe package on something. Man. Like, God is not a killjoy. Okay? Does He ask us to be wise? Does He ask us to be discerning? Does He ask us to be looking at others more than ourselves, and especially looking at His glory more than our own? Yes. But does that equal, don't enjoy the things that I've entrusted to you? No, it doesn't. And don't think about it only for material things. You know, how many of you have had a friend who maybe lost a spouse? Or had a friend who doesn't have a spouse? And then you go home to an awesome spouse. And you're like, man, I should feel bad for having a great wife. I should feel bad for having a good marriage. I confess, I've done that before. Pastors end up in a lot of people's places where there's a lot of tragedy and struggle, and there's been times I've gone home and thought, man, my life's like way too good. I should feel bad about this. Let's just sit near kids and suffer together tonight. And God's out there going, you can't even do this right, you know? You can't even do this right. So know that a passage like this is not calling us to anything less than joy in what God's given us. What it is saying is there's joy in using the things He's given us. There's also joy in giving it away. And there's oftentimes even greater joy in inviting others in to celebrate it with us. Aren't those the best uses of the stuff anyway? All right, let's pray. Father, we praise You that that's how Jesus works with us. His greatest joy is to bring us into His perfect righteousness and to celebrate with us that which is His. And that which is His together with You. Eternal glory. And to let us even taste that and share that. Not that we own it, but that we get to rejoice in it and manifest it, point to it. This is good news. And so we pray that we would never seek to steal from that glory, or we never seek to steal from that which You've entrusted to others, but that we certainly would seek to take that which You've given us in abundance and spread it for all and many to benefit from. And so we pray Your blessing on us to the end, that we would be all about that, to the glory of Christ Jesus.